This happened a few years ago in 2018, when me and my three other friends, who were all males in our early 20s, decided to travel to Bali for about a week, since it was cheap and we had time to spend, so why not? Our itinerary includes sightseeing, trying local foods, mountain climbing, visiting bars and at the beach, basically a typical vacation in Indonesia. It was honestly quite a surreal experience. The country is absolutely beautiful and the food was amazing. The only issue I had about the trip were the locals. Drugs were really prominent there, especially mushrooms. The streets were filled with druggies dying to sell us their drugs. I'm not exaggerating when I say this. One dude even grabbed my arm because I ignored his 2-for-1 deal for a one-way trip to meet Jesus. I shrugged him off while my friends laughed it off, suggesting that I may be passing up a chance to meet our Lord and Savior. He looked rabid and frantic, like he was about to pounce onto me like a dog diagnosed with rabies. I didn't even feel too afraid, as we were confident that we could handle them, since half of them were not even sober. However, that was only the tip of the iceberg. The horror starts when we get back to our Airbnb for the night. We had an early day the next morning and we were absolutely exhausted. The place was extremely cheap and it didn't even have a proper locking mechanism for the door. It had 2 wooden doors which swung inwards, and the only way to lock them was to wedge a wooden block through the holes mounted on the door. It was quite a primitive lock, but it gets the job done, I guess. Everything was going well until the last night of our trip, when we realized that the wooden block was missing. We looked everywhere for it, but to no avail. I just figured that one of us must have misplaced it somewhere. We settled for using a selfie stick. I know it sounds like a horrible idea, but we had to use something instead, because we didn't have anything that fits the hole to wedge the door close. We then turned in for the night, seemingly not expecting anything, since we had already stayed there for 6 days without any issues at all. I woke up to a strange clicking sound in the dead of the night. I got out of bed and I thought maybe it was one of the guys, so I nonchalantly approached the noise. My friends were all sleeping, so I decided to investigate the cause of the noise. The ruckus seemed to be coming from the door, so I headed towards them, feeling extremely confused. Who could be at our doorstep at this time of the night? I noticed the doors were slightly opened and the selfie stick was at a horrible deformed angle. I peeked outside and I saw 3 people staring through the gap between the doors. They were all really close to the entrance and were attempting to push the door open. I yelled at them, questioning their intentions, as I noticed one of them was holding the wooden block. I was in a state of shock and puzzled at the whole situation, as I recognized one of the men. He did the overall cleaning for the Airbnb's pathway during the day, so there was absolutely no reason for him to be there at 3 a.m. The other dude asked if the wooden block belonged to us, as they'd allegedly found it outside of our Airbnb. I definitely smelt a lot of lies, as there was absolutely no reason to do that at 3 a.m. I called for my guys and the 3 men immediately ran for it. I clued in the guys on the circumstances and we stayed up until morning came, in case they tried anything funny. We decided to report to the reception about their employee, but the description I gave them was not synonymous with theirs. They told me the housekeepers they hired consisted of only females in their late 30s and 40s. This sent shivers down our spines as we came to realize that we'd let a complete imposter in and out of our rooms while we were out. Luckily, nothing important was lost and we got out of the situation safely. I just can't imagine what would have happened if I didn't wake up on that fateful night as the doors were close to being opened. I was just grateful that it was our last night there. So I'm in 8th grade, and when I was in 6th grade we decided to book an Airbnb in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. It was right at the beach to where we had a large back deck facing the ocean. When we first got there, we unloaded our luggage and chose our bedrooms. It was me who was 11, my younger brother who was 7, and my older brother who was 18, my mom and my dad. Me and my younger brother chose the first bedroom to the left of the stairs when you walk up to the 2nd story. It had bunk beds, so it was perfect for me and him. My older brother chose a room in the middle right of the hallway because it had a queen-size bed and a TV. My parents, on the other hand, chose a master bedroom, which had a king-size bed, their own bathroom, a huge closet, and a balcony. Once we all finished what we were doing, we went outside to the deck and watched the sunset in the hot tub, when all of a sudden we heard noises from upstairs. My dad then grabbed his gun that he kept in his bag. and I grabbed the biggest kitchen knife I could find. We then went upstairs to investigate, and we had a look around. Let me first explain the layout so the story will make more sense. There were 4 rooms up there and a storage closet. There were 2 rooms as soon as you walked up the stairs. There was a bedroom on the left and a bathroom on the right. My dad and I went to go investigate the bedroom. We checked the closet and there were just a coat hanger and an extra blanket. We checked under the bed. My dad shined the flashlight on his gun under the bed, and all we saw were a couple of wrappers from food. As soon as we started to stand back up, we heard a quiet, faint little clicking sound coming from the master bedroom. When my dad and I went to go check on the master bedroom, we noticed that the closet was cracked open. I know for a 100% fact it was not like that when I first got there and put my luggage down. So when my dad opened the door, he was met with the Airbnb host standing in the closet holding a knife. He then saw my dad had a gun, and he stabbed my dad in the arm. When he got out of the closet, he didn't see me, so I cut him pretty deep in his back. He then fell to the ground and was screaming in agony. My dad is 6'2", 220 pounds, so he was able to easily pin the man to the ground. My dad then told me he's going to hold the man down there and to call the cops immediately, so I called the cops and they arrived in under 10 minutes. Long story short, my dad required 13 stitches in his arm, and the Airbnb host is now serving 20 years for attempted murder. This past weekend, I was at a bachelor party in Scottsdale, Arizona. We rented out an Airbnb that was managed through a property management company located in cul-de-sac that had one other rental. The other houses were residential. The front door had a key code that they changed for every new guest check-in. On the last night, we stayed up until about midnight before all going to our separate bedrooms. 2 girls locked up the front door, back door, and made sure the garage door was closed, and that the garage entry door was locked as well. We were all into true crime, so definitely overly aware, if that's even possible, of our safety and surroundings at all times. I then went to bed, and fast forward to 4 a.m., and I wake up in the middle of the night, and one of my friends wakes up as well because she heard the door slam close and someone say hello. I can now hear the voice as well, and my friend starts freaking out because this person starts walking towards the room she's in with 2 other friends in the room. The intruder opens the door up, and my friend shouted, "Who are you?" Standing at the door was a tall, pale figure with black boots, black pants, and a black hoodie, and a sadistic look on his face. He simply said, "Sorry." He then sprinted full speed out of the house and through the garage door. The 2 other girls in the room got up shortly after and checked everything else was okay, and everything was still locked. On the other side of the house, one of my friends had woken up later in the night because she had a super unsettling feeling that someone was watching her while she slept. Her room had floor-to-ceiling windows with sliding doors going out to the pool. She had no idea that any of this stuff had happened until the next morning. It was really scary the next morning because everyone else had slept through all of this happening. If the intruder had really bad intentions, my friend hadn't heard him enter, a very different scenario could have taken place. I'm not sure if that guy was crazy. I'm not sure what his true intentions were. But I'm just so thankful that everyone was okay. I'm a 20-year-old language student from Leicester, currently doing my year abroad in Bordeaux in the south of France. I haven't made too many friends here yet, and I'm not too much of a party girl like my big sister, but the friends I have I hold dear to me. I won't bore you too much with the details of my life here, but so far after the first few months, nothing too eventful has happened, besides a couple of run-ins with some local troublemakers, but other than that, I've had a really nice time. The food here is lovely, the city is beautiful, and the weather is a lot nicer than back at home. A couple of weeks ago, we took a trip around the south to my friend Clement's hometown in Gioun. There are lots of beautiful little villages scattered around this part of the countryside which are very peaceful, calm, and the people are pleasant. This is not an area that tourists typically visit. You find that the locals are often bemused to find foreign persons in this part of the country. Not too far from Gioun, there is a slightly larger village called Eugenie-les-Bains. I may sound like a broken record here, but this is another very stunning part of the country that not a lot of people know about besides the locals. In this town, there is a Michelin star restaurant, and we decided to pay a visit here for my boyfriend Brad's birthday, his 23rd to be exact. and as it was now 2 years since we had met, it was nearly our second anniversary. He had taken time off work to come to France and visit me, and we were glad to be spending some time together again, finally. We booked a table for the four of us in the restaurant, me, Brad, Clement, and his girlfriend Jeanette. Initially, we wanted to book into a restaurant hotel as well. However, it was way too expensive for students like us, so we booked into an Airbnb instead on the outskirts of town. We enjoyed a lovely meal and then sat outside drinking wine and smoking cigarettes in a true French fashion. We then went for a late-night stroll through the town, enjoying the quaint little frog statue situated within the town. After we got too tired, we decided to head back to our Airbnb and rest for the night before we would head off to our next destination. Clement's girlfriend Jeanette was Catholic and always wanted to visit Lourdes every year as part of her faith. We eventually made it back to the room and had another glass of wine and a couple more cigarettes before we headed off to bed at around 1 a.m. I woke up at about 3 a.m. to the sound of something scratching by the door. Or it might have been a window, I couldn't exactly tell as I'd never been here before. I wondered if it could have been a dog or perhaps another small animal like a cat maybe. However, the sounds faded away almost as quickly as they appeared, and I quickly drifted back off to sleep. Not long after, however, I was awoken again, not because of any sound from outside this time, but because Brad had gotten up for the bathroom. I lay back down on the pillow and closed my eyes, but then a sudden sense of dread filled me up. I don't know how, but I had this feeling that somebody was watching me. I looked around the room, with only the moonlight bringing in just enough light to see. I looked over to the window, which should have been closed via the shutter, but again, with Brad not being used to living around here, he had forgotten to lock it. I could see it slowly being pulled open by a hand outside, its silhouette lit by the moonlight, attempting to open the window while holding something that I couldn't quite make out. I then heard what sounded like an old-fashioned camera shutter closing repeatedly. I hadn't heard one of these in so many years, not since my grandfather would take family photos of us. But as I've heard this so many times before, it was unmistakable to me what the sound was. It felt like an eternity passed before I could bring myself to open my mouth and yell out to Brad for help. The person at the window quickly began to climb down, and whilst briefly in the moonlight I caught a clear glimpse of a very distinct ring on his left hand. I didn't get a long look at it, but it appeared to be wooden, with a distinct marking on the side. Seconds later, the assailant was gone. Brad rushed outside to try and see who it was, but all he saw was an empty street, and could hear the sound of footsteps becoming more and more distant. We didn't sleep a wink the rest of the night. Neither of us dared to. We checked out of the Airbnb as early as we could once there was sunlight. Clement and Jeanette went to the car, while me and Brad returned the keys to the lockbox. I messaged the host about what had happened, and whilst he seemed sympathetic, he said he would not be taking any action against what had happened. A few days have passed, and we still have no idea who tried to break in. Brad thinks it was the host as he wasn't too apologetic. However, Clement thinks because they're rich snobs and they don't care about foreigners, we will likely never figure out who it was. The creepiest thing for me was that some person has a photo of me lying there in bed, and I have absolutely no idea who has.